Community Center Church of God online service, a Christian center committed to excellently meeting the spiritual, social, and economic needs of its members and the community at large, filled at the feet of Jesus.
Welcome, brothers and sisters. Last week we commenced on the study of the book of Hosea, and we discussed a little bit of the introductory material. And so today we are going to look at the first three chapters of Hosea. A study of this portion of Hosea's writings has always drawn a great deal of interest and discussion because of the nature of the narrated marriage of the prophet Hosea. However, it is important to note that this is not a study on marriage, Jewish, biblical, or otherwise. Hosea was not writing to illustrate anything right or wrong about marriage. It is therefore crucial to attempt to understand what Hosea was saying to his readers by narrating the story of his marriage in his account. This is not to say that questions raised about marriage by readers of this book are not genuine or important, but they should be discussed in their correct context without being allowed to draw attention from the very equally important and crucial teaching of the prophet Hosea. Hosea begins with an important claim that the message he is proclaiming is the word of the Lord that came to him. This brings to memory the words of Jeremiah and Amos, who made it clear that once the Lord speaks to a prophet, he has no choice but to obey. Then he identifies the historical period and the span of his prophecy in Israel, which covered the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah as kings of Judah, and Jeroboam II as king of Israel. The prophet's ministry commences by the reception of an unusual command from the Lord, saying, "Go take to yourself an adulterous wife and children of unfaithfulness." This alone raises curious antennas in most readers with the inquiry, how can God ask Hosea to do such a thing? Without imputing evil to the Lord, the whole matter must be understood in context. Note that the Lord clarifies that he is not asking the prophet to demonstrate something wrong, but rather he is asking him to illustrate something seriously wrong that has already taken place. Not the reason God gives immediately to Hosea for his command when he continues to explain, because the land is guilty of the vilest adultery in departing from the Lord. If the concept of adulterous wife is so abhorring, how much more the concept of a people who have broken their covenant relationship with their God? One thing we must establish is, in order to understand the whole situation, is what the covenant relationship means to God in his word. In obedience to the Lord's command, Hosea married Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim. Out of the marriage, Hosea managed to obtain, through Gomer, 3 children whose Hebrew names are Jezreel, the firstborn, Lo-ruhamah, the secondborn, and Lo-ami, the thirdborn. Jezreel and Lo-ami are sons, and Lo-ruhamah is a daughter. These names are significant. First, Jezreel. The name was given after the valley of Jezreel because of the great slaughter committed by Ahab and Jehu in the valley of Jezreel, which the Lord had promised to revisit upon the house of Jehu, as Hosea had prophesied, because Jehu's motives were found to be wanting and based on the spirit of Jeroboam. So Jezreel represents God's intention to avenge the actions of Jehu in the valley of Jezreel and destroy Israel's power. The second name is Lo-ruhamah. The name was given to Hosea's daughter by God, meaning not pitied or not favored, or simply unloved. It was the Lord's statement that he would no longer love Israel as he did before because of Israel's rebellion. However, God declared his continued love for Judah, but he did not intend to express that love militarily. The third name was Lo-ami. The name means not my people. Hosea's third son was given this name at the Lord's command to denote God's rejection of Israel because they had disregarded him as their God. Next, following the reference to the children, the prophet sounds a note of hope after the judgmental illustrations. He pictures Israel after a period of time, having increased in numbers and reunited with Judah and restored to the Lord. He refers to a new dawn in Israel, calling it the great day of Jezreel, where the name Jezreel in this case is used in a sense of growth and prosperity. Israel is called my people and my beloved one, or my loved one. The hope of Israel is in the fact that the names given to the children of Hosea were not meant to remain permanent. Lo-ruhamah's name, for example, was changed to Ruhamah, meaning she has received mercy. The concept of the restoration of Israel and of the Christian believers to God is so central and inevitable among serious people of God and in the biblical teachings. This is the reason it becomes a key concern so early in the prophecy of Hosea. The prophet turns to the chastisement of Israel. The wife in this marriage left her husband and went to her lovers, and her children are beseeched to plead with their mother to abandon prostitution. Otherwise, the husband is threatening to expose her and deny her everything, including love for her and for the children. She preferred her lovers to her husband and said, I will go after my lovers, who give me my food and my water, my wool and my linen, my oil and my drink. But the husband plans to fence her in so she cannot reach or find her lovers, hoping that she will be compelled to return, saying, I will go back to my husband as at first, for then I was better off than now. The husband continues to lament that she has forgotten that he provided for her, but now come harvest time, he has decided to withdraw all provisions and celebrations from her and deny her even what belonged to her. Her vineyards and orchards will be destroyed completely for the animals. The prophet concludes this section of his writing by revealing who the real husband and wife are in the following final words of the husband. He says, "I will punish her for the days she burned incense to the Baals. She decked herself with rings and jewelry and went after her lovers, but me she forgot, declares the Lord." And so the revelation is this, in this passage, is that the husband is God and the unfaithful wife is Israel. Hosea then moves on to God's love for Israel. The Lord promises his estranged wife to accomplish certain things as her husband. And the very first one is to win her back. He is not going to sit back and wait for her to return to him, but he is going to appeal to her. He will turn her punishment, which is referred to as the Valley of Echo, into a door of hope. She will once again recognize her husband and never speak of Baal again. The Lord has determined to make a covenant with all beings to ensure security and peace for his people in the land by eliminating war and instruments of war. The husband then commits himself to her, to make her his wife forever, and to be faithful and just, showing her constant love, mercy, and compassion in righteousness and truthfulness. He will answer her prayers and keep his promises and take commands of the skies and the earth to cause rain and to the yielding of grain, grapes, and olives or oil. Then he will establish her for himself and make her prosper. In all this, she will recognize him as her Lord. Finally, the Lord declares his love for those who had been called unloved. To those who were called not my people, he says, "You are my people." And with the sound of that great news of restoration, they respond to him saying, "You are our God." All this was possible because the Lord released his love fully towards his people. And as a result, he fully committed himself to their restoration, regardless of their sinfulness. A man by the name Frederick Martin Lehman wrote a song which begins with the words, "The love of God is greater far than tongue or pen can ever tell." And so the story, coming back to marriage, the Lord once more spoke to Hosea. This is now in chapter 3. And asked him to go again and show love to a woman who was involved in an adulterous relationship. The condition given to Hosea is to love her as much as God still loves Israel, in spite their rebellion. The worst sinner in the world deserves as much love from God's people as God has loved the sinners. So, even though God has loved or had loved Israel, they did not change immediately and continued to turn to gods and to offer raisin cakes to idols. Raisin cakes were used in the cultic sacrifices to pagan goddesses. Hosea bought the wife by paying for her in silver and barley, and said to her that she will stay for some time without reverting to prostitution or engaging in any intimate relationship with anyone. He would wait for her with the same conditions. This is indicative of the fact that Israel will also go for some time without leadership or direction and without going back to idolatry. Then eventually, the people will return to the Lord their God, to the rule of the Davidic descent and the kingdom of our messianic hope. Hosea says, they will come trembling to the Lord and to his blessings in the last days. This is probably the climax of the emphasis of the message of Hosea, that God's people will return to him, fearful, awfully, trembling, but they will come finally to his blessings in the last days. May God bless you. Amen.